Hey YouTube, I'm back. I'm Anna, and today I am going to do a video of my favorite books and some youth, middle grade, young YA suggestions. So books that I read when I used to read. I cleared off all of my shelves, and these are my favorite books that I read a lot of times. Books that I think would still hold up or would be enjoyable for somebody who is in that elementary school, middle school age range, or even younger readers, and they are potentially ordered in like from youngest to oldest. And yes, this is it. This is the video. It's the video. We're going now. First of all, I guess most of these aren't like exciting suggestions. It's gonna be real obvious stuff and really just a chance for you to see my really pretty Narnia book. So first of all, I've got some Junie B. Jones books. Right here I've got Junie B. Jones' First Grader Boss of Lunch. Not my favorite Junie B. Jones book, just so everybody knows. Junie B. Jones is real good for beginning readers. Easy to read to kids and as you're by yourself with kids. But I thought Junie B. Jones was like very funny. She's, oh look, we have the same. Oh my god. We've got the same haircut. I like that she had glasses because I got glasses in second grade and I was still reading Junie B. Jones. I suggest it for kids who want to start reading, or if you want to start reading to your kids when they're still in like kindergarten. And then by the time you're in second grade, they're still fun to read on your own, and they're definitely age level appropriate for that. I also wanted to talk about these Bailey School Kids books. Got Werewolves Don't Run for President, which is number 49, and Wizards Don't Need Computers, which is number 20. These are by Debbie Dady and Marsha Thornton Jones. This was the first one I read. I read these in like second and third grade. As you can see, this one is illustrated. But they're like cute little chapter books about these kids. I do not remember any of the kids' names, but I remember that this one with he's got his hat on backwards. My favorite. And all of their teachers are like possibly monsters. You're pretty sure, but not 100% sure that the adult in the book is a monster, and I think that's really cute. These are really cute and really good short chapter books that you are definitely able to read on your own in like second or third grade. Also in like the same age range, I love Beverly Cleary books. Here I've got all the Ramona books, I think. I remember reading these in like third or fourth grade. As you can see, these are a little bit longer. So these are, I guess, are good to read to keep kids who are in second or third grade. These all on my own when I was in like third or fourth grade, and I really enjoyed them. They're so sweet. For the next age group up, Harry Potter was like a big part of my life. Here I have Sorcerer's Stone in hardcover. Here's Deathly Hallows. I definitely started reading them on my own by the time I was in second or third grade. You can definitely read them on your own by the time you're 10 or 11. And they're also really good to read with your kids. And that was a really special part of growing up. Starting in about first or second grade, my dad started reading these to me and my siblings. I think the next excellent one to read starting on your own in about fourth grade, The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. These books follow Percy Jackson, and he is the son of Poseidon, and he goes on all sorts of adventures. I found these really fun and fast-paced, and with characters with a lot of middle school energy and middle school personalities. They just have such a special place in my heart, and honestly the writing is really, really good and funny. And when my teacher read this to us in fourth grade, she stopped like one chapter from the end because we literally ran out of time in the year, and I made my mom go and buy the book for me, and I think this is actually probably the exact same copy. I also have a lot of fond memories of the Chronicles, who, you know, don't remember anything about these books, but they are about these two little boys here and their older sister, and they are by, I can't say Italian last names, which is embarrassing, Tony DiTerlizzi and Holly Black. I find a journal in the woods, and then they start being haunted by, not haunted, but they start being able to see and interact with all sorts of magical creatures. And I thought they were really cool and inventive and magical realism fantasy that I was really craving in middle school. These are almost definitely middle grade though. They're real tiny, and these were also a real bright spot for me in middle school. So I also like to shout out The Thief Lord, which I think was a summer reading book at some point, which has never left me. This is by Cornelia Funk, a group of kids who live in Venice, and they are little pickpockets in Venice. And The Thief Lord is a kid who really wants to be an adult. He doesn't want to be a kid anymore. And it's also, I think, magical realism. To also talk about A Wrinkle in Time. I know there's a whole bunch of these books, but I've only ever read A Wrinkle in Time, and A Wrinkle in Time is one of the only fantasy books one of the only sci-fi books I've ever actually really enjoyed. This is about Meg and her brother Charles Wallace, who go on a most dangerous and extraordinary adventure through the universe, and then trying to find their father. You've seen the movie that came out in March last year. Doesn't even hold up to half of the adventure and excitement in this book, and definitely something you can read on your own by the time you're in like 6th or 7th grade, probably even younger. The book I actually want to talk about is Al Capone Does My Shirts. This is the second one. This is Al Capone Shines My Shoes. I read this in 5th or 6th grade. Maybe I was a little bit older, and when I was reading it, I thought it was below my reading level. But I still really enjoyed it. It's about Moose, and he lives on Alcatraz because his dad is a guard on Alcatraz. He has a younger brother who has autism, but he lives on Alcatraz at the same time that Al Capone is there, and Al Capone is one of the people who does the laundry at Alcatraz. That's his job at the prison. Al Capone Does My Shirts is a little mystery, an adventure on Alcatraz, and I remember it was so heartwarming and so exciting, and a really pretty good mystery. So that's Al Capone Does My Shirts by Jennifer Choldenko, and this is Al Capone Shines My Shoes. And I wish I could remember anything that happened in Al Capone Does My Shirts, otherwise I would definitely read this, but I don't foresee it. So gonna give this away to somebody who does really like Al Capone Does My Shirts. Here I have Number of the Stars by Lois Lowry. I remember really enjoying this one. This is about Anne-Marie Johansson and her best friend Ellen Rosen. Her best friend Ellen is Jewish, and her family, Anne-Marie's family, hides them during, I want to say, the Nazi occupation of Denmark. They live in Copenhagen, and it's a really exciting novel for how tiny it is. And I remember thinking it was really short, but Lois Lowry's books are always really short, and they always pack a huge gut punch. I remember I also, in addition to Number of the Stars, I've read quite a few. Gossamer by Lois Lowry, which is about a little dream thing that plants dreams. I'm not getting it confused with the BFG by Roald Dahl. I thought that one was also really moving, even though I can't remember anything that happens. This one is moving, and I read this going into 4th grade, I think, for summer reading. And I think Lois Lowry is a really good bet for kids who are about 10 or 11 years old, even older. I still haven't read The Giver, and that's one of my #1 goals for 2019 is to read The Giver. And before I get into YA, I want to talk about the Chronicles of Narnia, which is the whole point of this video. Look at my beautiful copy of the Chronicles of Narnia. This is, of course, not my only copy of the Chronicles of Narnia. Chronicles of Narnia is about the magical world of Narnia. Here you see Lucy and Tumnus, which is the first image of Narnia that C.S. Lewis ever had. And these stories are so rich with magic. They're just so rich with magic and adventure and good-hearted children, and they're what fantasy is really about to me. When I first read it, not when I first read it, I first read it when I was young, and I didn't really like them. But when I first read it on my own when I was 11, they were definitely children's novels, and I was definitely moving away from children's books. I really fell in love, and they have such gravitas and heart to them that I don't think you could ever ask for anything more out of fantasy. Then I have some other novels, YA. I think I'm gonna start with The Thief by Mikaelson. The Thief is about Jen. I've talked about this like a million times because I mostly made this channel so that I could talk about these books. But I read this in 8th grade for the first time, and it's definitely YA, but this one reads younger than the rest of them for a number of reasons, the languages, the themes. And so this is a good one if you're in middle school, and it's really exciting, a really exciting Narnia-esque book that is fun, and I have a lot of things to say about it. So if you read this, you know, let me know. Then I want to talk about something, and I didn't realize. First of all, here's my copy of Aragon by Christopher Paolini, which I read Aragon twice, and I knew by the time I was in 5th grade that this is not quality fantasy, but also at the same time, I love it. I have a bookmark in here in the last book, Brasinger, because, you know, I didn't like it. That I made in Girl Scouts in like 5th grade, and then I stuck in this book when I was reading it, and I have not moved. I stopped on page 422 when I was in 5th grade. But here's the thing. Aragon is a fun enough romp of a fantasy book that if you're looking for some young adult fantasy that's pretty lighthearted, I think. I don't really remember. I think people die, but it's like not that bad. You need to move up in the world of fantasy, start ready to read some bigger books with some maybe perhaps complex characters and trying to develop some themes, or you're just like a hoe for Lord of the Rings. I definitely think Aragon is the place to start. I did this to a bunch of my covers, I think including like Goblet of Fire, and I have not read Harry Potter since I've been like 13 years old, and that's how old I think I was when I read this cover, and at that point it had already been a couple years since I like hadn't read this. I got this when it came out, haven't read it since. Yeah, I got this at the end of 5th grade, and I have not opened it since, but that means that these are definitely accessible to you if you're in middle school. And you shouldn't be watching this video because I curse a lot. People don't talk about these books probably because they're bad, but I really liked Murtagh when I was in middle school. And The Hunger Games is about Katniss, and she lives in District 12, and that's more or less the place that I live, like geographically in the United States, and it's definitely the place that I live where I go to school. And she volunteers to go fight in her sister's place in a death match, and this was recommended me to by a friend of mine when I was in 7th grade, and I'd actually already owned it. I got it in 6th grade at like the Scholastic Book Fair, and even though I have never liked Katniss, I have never thought she was like a good person, someone who would be easy to be around. These books are so moving and so much, and somebody was talking about them the other day, and they were like, The Hunger Games, for like all of its flaws, really deals with, like, does dystopia really well. These are definitely for more advanced readers. They're definitely YA, and they're definitely for if you're gonna read them in middle school, for a more mature middle schooler, but I think they're definitely worth the read. I'm gonna reread The Hunger Games pretty soon, probably February. Okay, so here's the thing. When I was in middle school, I was so busy being emo and not doing anything but reading Narnia that I did not have time nor the patience to read anything that what most of my friends were reading. I didn't like Meg Cabot, I didn't like Sarah Dessen. I've never read a Sarah Dessen book, and I can tell you I've read one page of a Sarah Dessen book and I was like, no. I didn't like any of the nonsense that my friends would lend me. I read this one Meg Cabot book called like Airhead or something. I don't know. I didn't like it. I didn't care for it. I scoff at my friends when they would try to lend me books or give me book recommendations. That's the kind of 13-year-old I was. Well, the thing is, in 7th or 8th grade, I I wanted to like relate to my peers. So I like started to pick up like romance novels, and I didn't like them, except for perhaps, what is probably the worst book I've ever read, which is Beastly. Right, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I read this twice. That's how much I loved Beastly, and it's why I have not been able to part with it. Of all the nonsense books that I was told to read, asked to read in middle school, right when I had a real attitude about like reading and wouldn't read anything anybody asked me to or recommended for me to read. Even at that point I stopped reading books for class. I love this terrible Beauty and the Beast retelling. So, you know, if you've got a middle schooler at home, or you are a middle schooler at home, like me in middle school, who just absolutely refuses to read any nonsense, any disgusting nonsense that your friends want you to read. This is disgusting nonsense, and I'm gonna be straight with you. I don't even really remember how it works. You know, there's just like a witch in his English class, and then he gets turned into an ugly beast, and then he kidnaps Vanessa and Hudgens, and they fall in love. And that's the plot of the movie, and I don't think that the witch, played by one of the Olsen twins in the movie, even goes to their high school, but at the end of the day, whatever. This was the only book that I could talk about with any of my friends by the time I was in 8th grade, because it was the only one of the books that I was reading that I could convince them to read, and it was the only book that they, you know, it's, at the end of the day, it's not good, but I, for some reason, can't get rid of it. Definitely for people who are at the upper end of middle school, 8th, maybe 9th or 10th grade, but, also, like, it has such a warm place in my heart, and also apparently a piece of paper in it, that I can't get rid of it. Do we want to know what's in this piece of paper? Oh, it's the lyrics to the song Terrible Things by Mayday Parade. So, welcome, thanks for joining me on this trip through my childhood and mostly through what a terrible person I was in middle school, concluding and discovering lyrics that I printed out to Terrible Things. Like, I copied and pasted the words to Terrible Things, and then printed it out like that. So that's cool. Thanks for watching. Click like, and what are some books you read in middle school? What are your middle school faves? Middle school faves. Mine is Beastly.